Hello and welcome to my version of Miyazaki Month. I've decided to go right ahead and dedicate this entire month to one of the most inspiring animation directors out there. So inspiring that he is thus far the only Japanese animations director to become a household name in the Western world. Someone we actually do recognize, and we recognize his movies. And it's pretty obvious why. Miyazaki. And I am not even going to try and pronounce his first name. I know his son, also called Miyazaki, is making movies now, but the son is Miyazaki Jr., and this is just the Miyazaki, okay? And the Miyazaki has done something that a lot of directors would kill to be able to do. Miyazaki had a very strong and very unique, interesting personality that soaks through all of his movies and all of the stories that he's telling, making them just as unique and fantastic as his mind. You can tell when a movie is a Miyazaki movie. You can see the man himself through the pictures and the stories that the movies are trying to tell. And he tells deeply personal stories with messages that can sometimes be a little bit on the nose, but is genuinely meant and showcased with so much passion, creativity and earnesty that you can't help but feel it. But we'll get more into that later, because this month I will go through every single one of his movies, starting with the first feature movie Miyazaki ever directed, and we'll end with the last one. So let's jump right into it. The first movie the Miyazaki ever made, Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro. Or the Wolf the Third, or Lupin the Third, depending on which dub you're watching. Why change Lupin's name to Lupin? I don't get it. I know that's how they pronounce it in Japan, because they don't pronounce I's and N's, but his name is Lupin, not Lupin.
You won't get away, Lupin!
Now, this being the very first movie Miyazaki ever directed, of course it's not one of the movies where he got to have a lot of creative control and thusly couldn't really put a lot of his own personality into it. In fact, Miyazaki's first movie is a franchise movie. In Japan, it is a pretty ordinary thing to do to have a very popular anime and then make a couple of movies out of it to release them in cinema. And it has bled just a little bit over in the Western world, where the Pokemon movies out of the same process were released in our cinemas. Lupin III was already a highly popular franchise by the time this movie was made. In fact, it was one of the most popular animes and mangas in Japan of the time. Actually, it's so popular that it's still alive and well today, and still gets new stuff released from time to time in Japan. The last OVA came out just last year, and the last series, a new interpretation again, came out the year before that. So it's still pretty big, this franchise. Miyazaki had his breakthrough working on the animated television show as a writer and director on several episodes, and was finally offered the chance to direct the cinema movie. Only direct, mind you, he didn't write it. And well, this isn't even the first Lupin movie that was ever made. The franchise had been going for quite a while before this movie was being made. And as a result of all of that, this isn't really a Miyazaki movie. But it's not supposed to be. it's supposed to be a Lupin the Third movie first and foremost. Miyazaki was a no one back then, no one cared, no one knew who he was. He was just a newcomer doing a job for an already successful franchise and was just doing paid job. But it's pretty evident that even though Miyazaki didn't get to write it and had to make the movie true to the already existing franchise and animated show, he cared a lot about the movie regardless and gave it his all, giving it all the passion he has always put into all of his movies. And as a Lupin the Third movie, it's really good and a really enjoyable watch. I don't know if it's the best Lupin the Third movie I've ever seen, but then again, that's because the Lupin the Third movies are all pretty good. This though is definitely up there being one of the better ones. And well, for those who knows nothing about this franchise and has never ever seen a Lupin episode in your entire life, you actually don't need to watch this movie. This movie is a perfectly good entrance point to the franchise as a whole, and stands quite fine as its own movie without a franchise being needed to explain it. Which is much more than I can say of most other movies of this nature, even movies I like. For instance, I thought that One Piece has come up with some pretty great movies in connection to the anime, but if you don't read the manga or watch the anime One Piece, give up on the movies right now, you won't get it. That's pretty much like how the Nostalgia Critic had no chance with the Pokemon movie. This movie though, Lupin the Third, different. You can just watch it, it's fine. It also seems like a great practice point for Miyazaki, as the figure of Lupin and the movie relies a lot on that subtle visual humor that would become one of Miyazaki's many trademarks later on. Lupin is a very fun physical character to watch, whom is bright, energetic, likable, laughs a lot, and often ends up in a lot of slapstick situations. There couldn't have been a better figure for Miyazaki to practice on. In fact, it has stricken me that what makes so many of Miyazaki's figures so likable is how filled with simple joy and energy they are, not holding back on that energy, which reminds a lot about Lupin the character. So maybe a positive influence is to get from there. Maybe Lupin actually helped form Miyazaki a little bit from the beginning, form a bit of his slapstick humor later on. Maybe. Quite interesting. This movie is not exactly a must-see of the Miyazaki movies, but it is an interesting look into where he started. Like so many others, he got help in the beginning by working on something already popular and were then able to break free and ride the wave following. Though that makes it a bit ironic that he was big up against mainstream anime this year, when mainstream was what gave him his break into feature film directing in the first place, and possibly isn't the reason he could make his next movie and then co-found Studio Ghibli. But then again, this franchise has this lady, Fujiko, who, you know, always shows off her breasts and is sexy female fatale, but not in this movie. In this movie, she's pretty much downplayed, which I do think you can trace back to Miyazaki. He has more respect for women than that. More about that later. This movie though, as its own, is fun and coherent. It's a funny little look into Miyazaki's early work as well. It's a very solid introduction into an old beloved franchise, a very, very awesome franchise, and it's just fun to watch. So well, no harm done watching it, no harm not watching it. It's just a funny little movie. And in the next video, we will be switching genres completely, as I will look at the first movie that Miyazaki both wrote and directed, and pretty much just cemented everything he's about to the public and everything he would be about in the future. And also, maybe some of you have noticed, I got a new roommate. I got two of them actually. She wanted a cameo, so she got one. I hope I'll be seeing you next time.
The agony booth is a most effective means of discipline.